Howdy, neighbor. Thanks for coming back for the next chapter of Logan versus the Hateful Strawberries. Here we go with Chapter 5, Sneaky Pete. Logan's feet drug as if they were full of lead as he trudged towards the barn. Why hadn't he just fed the animals? It was normally a 10-minute job, even in the evening twilight. Now that it was dark out, he was going to have to carry a lantern to see, and it was going to take twice as long, and he was so hungry. When he got to the barn, he picked up the red oil lantern and carefully removed the glass. It wouldn't do for him to break something on top of all the trouble he was already in. He set it in the little patch of light he was getting from the house and pulled a box match from the holder nailed to the wall just under the lantern hook. It took a couple of swipes on the striker to get the match to light up. Then he waited a moment to make sure the match wouldn't wink out before he touched it to the wick. The lamp caught on fire, and he held the match to it for just another second to make sure it stayed lit before shaking the match to put it out before it burned his fingers. He dropped the charred match on the barn's dirt floor, stomped on it, and rubbed his leather-soled shoes back and forth on it, taking some of his frustrations out in the process. He returned the glass to the lamp as the hunger pangs clawed at his stomach like a cat on a doorpost. He carried the lantern to the feed bin and set it down while he scooped feed corn into a bucket. He was so hungry the corn looked like it might be tasty. But he knew better. He dared Aiden to eat some uncooked kernels once, and then Aiden double-dog dared him back, so Logan ended up with eating the awful stuff. He didn't understand how something that looked like sweet corn could be so... He wondered just how hungry he'd have to be before he'd actually eat it. He picked up the heavy bucket in his right hand and the lantern in his left, then struggled along feeling a bit wobbly due to the weight difference. As he struggled, he couldn't help but feel that Pa wasn't being fair. He would have fed the animals after dinner. They weren't going to go all night without food, so why should he? Yeah, why should he have to go all night without food? There were strawberries in the barn's loft. And they were good. For a moment, he almost dropped the bucket of feed and ran for the stairs to get some strawberries. But the memory of the look of profound disappointment on Pa's face stuck with Logan. So despite the claws of hunger tearing him up inside, he hobbled along with the uneven load to finish feeding the animals by lantern light. 20 minutes passed, and dinner must have been over because the lights in the kitchen dimmed, and the great room windows took on a familiar glow as Logan was about to sneak up to the loft for some late-night strawberries. The light spilling out of the house illuminated the rim of the telescope where it rolled after Logan dropped it out the window. As he debated what to do about the telescope, his stomach reminded him just how hungry he was. However, if Pa decided to shut the windows, he'd be sure to see the telescope lying there, and then Logan would find himself in a whole new world of trouble. Besides, if he managed to sneak the telescope out of Pa's room, he could take it up to the loft when he went to get the strawberries. Logan thought about blowing out the lantern before sneaking over to the house to hide better, but then he thought if Pa saw the light out in the barn, he'd figured Logan was just finishing up. So instead, Logan went into the barn and out the back door. He followed the edge of the barn to the barnyard fence, which was barely visible in the early evening starlight. The fence guided him within 20 feet of the dark corner of the house. His stomach growled, and he held his breath, waiting to see if Pa would come storming out. But after slowly exhaling and taking a deep breath, he relaxed and then ran in a crouch to the side of the house. His heart rate was up, and blood was pounding in his ears. He couldn't even hear himself think, so he had no idea if his run had given him away. But he was so close, maybe 2 or 3 yards, he decided to crawl the last bit. His fingers landed on the smooth leather of the spyglass's carrying strap. Logan's heart leapt in the excitement that he'd caught his prize. He snatched it as he backed away and realized only too late that the glint he'd seen from across the yard wasn't the buckle, but the end of the spyglass, because the case cap had fallen open. His quick jerk of the case pulled the container off the spyglass, leaving it to clatter on the wood of the porch, then roll at an angle towards him and fall with a thump from the porch. "What's that?" Pa's voice bellowed from inside. Logan's breath caught in his throat, and he shrunk into the wall just below the window. He wished he could shrink into the crack between the logs his hand rested on. "It's probably Logan coming back," Ma responded. "No," The lantern is still on in the barn. His chores should be done by now. I suspect he's out there sulking, so I bet it's another raccoon, Pa explained. I don't think so, honey. I'm sure you've managed to do in every raccoon in the county by now. Ma's calming voice came through the window. Not every raccoon. Logan had to stifle a laugh. Pa really hated raccoons, and he was hiding one in the barn. He was suddenly worried about what Pa might do if he found Rascal. Come sit down, dear, Ma encouraged. We need to discuss what to do about that boy of yours. Logan breathed a slow sigh of relief, but now he was torn between eavesdropping on his parents' conversation and trying to retrieve the spyglass. A slight rumble from his stomach pushed him to choose the spyglass. He would hate to have his rumbly and his tumbly give him away. So he slowly backed away from the window light before crawling sideways off the porch, carefully bringing the case with him. Once he was off the porch, he belly crawled to where he could reach the spyglass just outside the light of the window. He snagged the rim of the big end of the spyglass with the tips of his fingers and gently pulled it toward him. He bit his lip as he did this, hoping it wouldn't catch on something that made noise. But after a few gentle tugs, he could wrap his fingers around the spyglass. He pulled it and the case to his chest, then rolled into the darkness towards the fence. He got it and didn't get caught. Something about this minor victory sent his blood racing. He couldn't wait to get up in the barn and eat some strawberries and look at the stars with the spyglass. Despite his desire, he took a moment to stuff the spyglass in the case and latch it securely. Then he threw it over his shoulder and tore off down the edge of the fence as fast as he dared in the dark. When he came to the barn loft stairs, he paused for a moment, wondering if he should get the lantern. But then he realized that might give him away. Better to leave it just like that. If Pa thought he was sulking, it might be better than him thinking he was up to something in the barn loft. Besides, the light might mess up his view of the stars. When he got to the top of the ladder, something looked off. He had hung the sack from the nail in the ceiling, but now there was something about the size of the sack that seemed to be hanging next to it. Rascal! Somehow the critter had managed to climb up the support beam and was hanging upside down trying to get into the sack. He would have to find a better place to hide those strawberries. At the thought of the strawberries, his stomach grumbled, spurring him to save the sack before the raccoon did damage. He scooted along the edge of the hay and arrived just as the sack fell from Rascal, chewing on twine Logan had tied it with. He knew that because slobbery twine landed on his hand as he caught the sack. Gross. Rascal started in with a barking fit that set Logan's teeth on edge. Pa's going to hear, and then there'd be trouble. Thinking quickly, Logan grabbed a strawberry from the sack and held it up to Rascal. It immediately stopped chattering at him and scrambled down the beam. Then it sat on its haunches, looking up at Logan pitifully. Logan handed the strawberry to the critter and then took one for himself. Keep it down, Rascal. We don't want to get Pa riled up. Just sit there and enjoy your strawberry. Logan wasn't sure, but it seemed like the little guy understood what he was asking because it seemed to sit more comfortably as it slowly chewed its treat. Logan was more enthusiastic about his food. He tore the leaves off the top of a strawberry and down the whole thing in 3 big bites. He was famished after the long walk back from the woods and the night's chores. He shoved a second strawberry down his throat before registering the first one hitting his stomach. As he reached for another, he paused. He remembered that earlier just one strawberry had completely satisfied him, and there weren't a lot of them left in the sack, and the woods was far away. If he was going to have some to show for the fair, he better slow down. Just one more, he told himself, and this time he tried to nibble it slowly. Something about the slow gnawing seemed to set off the effect he'd felt earlier. The lantern light from below began to flicker with tinges of purple and blue, and as he looked out into the sky, the stars seemed to twinkle ever so brightly. He was so caught up in the strawberries he'd forgotten the real reason he'd come up here. He unslung the case from his shoulder and was about to take the spyglass out when he realized his fingers were a bit sticky. So he took a second to lick them off, enjoying the strawberry's perfect sweetness. This almost drove him to eat one more, but then he saw Rascal holding up its hands begging for more. He knew that if he got another for him, the raccoon would want another, and before he knew it, they would be all out. He quickly tied the bag shut to slow them down. He needed some strawberries for the fair. Then he shook his head at the critter and took the spyglass from the case. Logan wasn't sure if it was the shiny clasp on the strap or just general curiosity, but as he went to set the case down, the raccoon grabbed it from him. Logan held on tight for just a second, wondering if the raccoon might damage it, but then realized that fighting over it might cause more damage, so he let it go. Instead, he laid back on the pile of hay and looked out to the stars with the spyglass. The stars in the sky seemed to explode with color. He'd never seen anything so beautiful in his life. They almost seemed to be dancing, or maybe his head was spinning. Something about laying on his back and looking up appeared to set the whole world spinning in a way he didn't like. He closed his eyes and sat up to find Rascal standing with outstretched arms, seeming to ask for the spyglass. The case was one thing. It's kind of hard to mess up leather, but Pa always said the spyglass was a fine instrument that you couldn't mess with or the lenses might get scratched or out of alignment. No, Rascal, you play with the case. This is mine. Rascal barked at him and held up its arms in demand. Uh-oh, this is going to get nasty. He reached for the case thinking the raccoon would settle down if he put it away, but as he reached for it, the critter began barking more insistently. Shh, Rascal, Pa's going to hear. That does it, Pa's voice came from the house as the door slammed. I know there's a coon out here. Too late. Before Logan could think of what to do about Pa coming for Rascal, the little critter leapt for the spyglass, and it was all Logan could do to hold on to it as a whirlwind of teeth and claws assaulted him. The two rolled around in the hay, struggling to control the spyglass. Logan, is that you? Pa's voice came from below. Before Logan could respond, the spyglass slipped from his finger and over the loft's edge, to land with a loud thunk on the ground. Logan! Pa's voice bellowed from below with such fury that the rascal scurried off to hide under the straw. Logan, you get down here this instant. Logan peeked over the loft's edge to see Pa, red face and jaw set. At Pa's feet was the spyglass. The front lens had fallen out and the rim looked bent. Logan wasn't sure what the punishment would be, but he knew it would be a lot worse than just missing dinner. Hey friend, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 5. Hope you come back soon for Chapter 6.